On a cold Sunday in January, I left my home in Illinois to catch a red-eye flight to San Francisco to meet with a client. But this wasn't just any meeting. I was working with other product owners to present design mock-ups to the CEO of a giant e-commerce site. These designs would lay the groundwork for almost an entire year's worth of initiatives. The whole thing was really inconvenient for me. I had just been to San Francisco a few days earlier. Here I was making this last-minute trip again. But that's the thing. The meeting was so important that it was worth everyone's effort to drop everything and make it happen. In fact, there were meetings about the meeting. The Friday before, I spent 4 hours on a conference call where everyone practiced what they would say. I personally spent 16 hours on a plane, 2 nights in a hotel, and an entire day in a conference room just for this one meeting. The whole charade centered around one thing: presenting design ideas to a CEO to get his approval. Now, what struck me about the whole thing was the amount of effort just going into communicating design ideas to one person. The time I spent actually making the designs was nothing compared to the time and energy that everyone was putting in to getting ready for this meeting. One thing was clear: if we don't get approval for our designs, our projects won't see the light of day. Communicating about the designs was more important than the designs themselves. Now, you may not have a large staff. Meeting with the CEO might not be such a big deal, but the principle's the same. The way we talk about design to stakeholders is critical to the success of our projects. Now, I've always loved to talk to people about my work. In fact, I used to interview for jobs I had no intention of accepting, just because it gave me the opportunity to practice in a low-risk environment. Once I actually negotiated a salary with a manager just to see how much I could get him to offer me before turning him down. So having done freelance work in college, I was accustomed to meeting with clients and helping them understand my work. So when I got an interview for a job that would require me to manage the design department at a medium-sized company, I was ecstatic. Here I was, fresh out of college, ready to take on the world. I probably thought I knew a lot about the design business. Well, during the interview process, I had to meet with the vice president of marketing. She was a short woman. She wore her hair in a bun. Her style was terse and to the point. She was the kind of person that didn't mess around, and you probably didn't want to mess around with her at all. But she asked me the most impressionable question of my career. During the interview, she asked, "Okay, let's say I have a new project for you. What's the first thing you would ask me about it? What's the most important thing that you need to know?" Now, at the time, the answer seemed simple. I launched into a series of questions about whether it was a print piece or a website, the use of color and imagery, the timeline for when it needed to be completed. But she interrupted me. She said, "No, you're wrong. The most important thing you could ask me is, what do I want to communicate?" I was crushed. Not only had she exposed my superficial design ego in a way that made me feel really small, but I knew she was right. And I felt completely clueless about the thing I was most confident in, my ability to talk about design. You see, I wasn't astute enough to recognize that my stakeholder had a different agenda than my own. I failed to understand what she needed. To her, the project was about communication. To me, it was only about pixels. And in that moment, I realized that my ability to talk to other people about design went far beyond my own ambitions. In order for me to be successful as a designer, I had to figure out how to communicate to my clients what my designs did. I had to answer their questions in ways that made sense to them, not me. If I could do that, I thought, I would be successful. So in order for us to wrap our brains around what it means to talk to people about design, I want to take a step back and look at where we've come from. The term UX is new. It hasn't been around very long. We used to be called graphic designers and web designers. In the last few years, terms like UX and UI and interaction design, information architecture have taken over the landscape of the design field. So it's a new role within organizations and businesses. A lot of us started out in some other part of the organization or a completely different field like IT or behavioral psychology. So businesses are learning what it means to make design the center of their model and to manage people with these varied skill sets. So that means we have a new team. Product owners, managers, engineers, designers are all working together more intimately than ever before. And we have to figure out how to do that effectively. Well, that makes it a new challenge. What happens when you take an industry of creative right-brained thinkers and thrust them into the middle of a product cycle with usability problems and business goals? Well, it's no surprise that there's a disconnect between what other stakeholders want and what the user experience designer has so carefully crafted. So we're at the intersection of this growing UX design industry where the digital product business is transitioning from making pretty pictures to creating great user experiences. And we're having to meet with developers, managers, and executives whose agenda and perspective may at times be at odds with ours. Now, the growth of the UX designer has changed our role in so many ways, but none more than the need to explain ourselves to people that don't share our experience in design. Well, complicating the situation is the fact that design is largely subjective. It's exposed in a way that few other areas are. What one person likes, another person hates. What seems obvious to me might not be obvious to you. This is why design is such a difficult thing to talk about, especially with people that aren't designers. There's little common understanding of what design is or should be. Now, when designers work together, they have a shared vocabulary and understand what they're talking about, but it's not the same with non-designer stakeholders. They may not know the right words. They may have a hard time describing what they need or want. Our job is to figure this out. But more than that, a lot of our design decisions are based purely on intuition. Now, our intuition could be spot on, but that's not going to be enough to win people over when they disagree with you. So we have to learn to analyze our decisions and communicate them in a way that's effective. But unless you're prepared to defend your decisions intelligently, the only thing you can say is that you disagree. And that degree of subjectivity has got to change. Now, another major change in organizations that affects our ability to communicate with the people around us is a shift toward product, and specifically product design. The web has changed, and in particular, the web has seen this shift where it started out simply as a way to communicate your message, then to a way to actually sell your product, to now we're at the point where the web is actually the product itself. You see, when our job was just to make the company look good on the web, it didn't matter as much who got their final say when it came to the design. When we started selling products on the web, stakeholders mostly just wanted to know that it worked. But now that we're solving problems, we're creating the interface for the product itself, and everyone has an opinion on the best way to solve it. Well, businesses have changed too. Closely aligned with the growth of the web is this new business approach where whole organizations arrange themselves to value design as a part of their core culture. As startups and big corporation CEOs are starting to value design, we see this organizational model that allows businesses to really hone in on and make product design their primary strength. So, as a result, you have designers who started out somewhere else, creating stuff that was mostly focused on the look and feel. And you have managers and executives who cared more about the utility and the function of their thing. But more and more, these two primary players are moving towards each other. Executives realize how important design is, and they want to influence that process. Likewise, designers have come to understand the value of creating an experience that's based on solving real problems. And so the two meet together in a meeting. That's where we find ourselves today, in a meeting with people that have no idea how to do our jobs and yet consistently find it their place to tell us what our jobs are. So from these original attitudes and a transition toward design comes a mutual understanding that great design will create great products. A great product will sell, it'll be easier to support and maintain, and it'll be good for the bottom line. But why does this matter? If we're the experts, why should we have to explain ourselves to non-designers? Well, the answer is that UX has gone mainstream, both in pop culture and within today's organizations. Everyone has an opinion about your work, right? Social media has changed how people see design. Millions of people from every demographic use Facebook each day. Social media has become such an intimate part of our lives that any design change can incur the wrath of the user base. That's because when you change design, you're changing the way people see themselves and the world around them. This is why so many people have an opinion about your work. But politics too is influenced by design trends and UX. The most successful candidates, they understand product design and social media. Designed products have fueled uprisings in places like Syria and Turkey. Digital media sharing has shown routine police work turn deadly. That means that an interface designed by someone like you in a meeting with stakeholders became a tool for empowering an entire population toward revolution. This is why so many people have an opinion about your work. Even more, though, is the personalization and the shrinking of devices. You see, we used to interact with digital products at arm's length on a display using indirect input methods like a keyboard or a mouse. But now the products are on our arms, they're in our ears, our pockets, always on, always connected. Every design change is personal. This is why so many people have an opinion about your work. But even startup culture has affected how businesses approach their market. Disrupting an industry has become this gold standard for startups, right? Find a problem and fix everything with design. Nowadays, the entire process of just getting a cab has been designed into a product like Uber, who looked at the problem and found design solutions to everything. This is why so many people have an opinion about your work. You see, our whole culture has shifted in its thinking about design, specifically the design of interfaces, of services, and products. Everyone has a personal device now, and they're only getting more personal. It's no wonder that everyone, everywhere, at every level of the organization is intensely interested in and has an opinion about the UX that you are trying to create. How are you going to deal with it? What once was relegated to the "oh, that's nice" category of insignificant design is now the center of everyone's attention. People from all over the organization want to participate in your process. Marketing, executives, developers, customer service, even people in accounting are going to want to tell you how they think it should work. People are excited about UX because they recognize the long-term effect it has on the product, on the business, on the bottom line. The good news is, you're a very popular person right now. So the purpose of our time together during this series is to become better communicators of design to people who may not have the same depth of experience in design or technology that we do. To expertly explain design decisions to the people that have influence over our projects for the purpose of convincing them that we're right. In my experience, designers have a difficult time adequately communicating to non-designers in a way that's effective. So stay with me throughout this series so you can better learn to communicate with stakeholders, keep your sanity, and still deliver the best user experience.